Okay, there we go. Hi there, I'm Bainter, and this is a discussion of Eric by Terry Pratchett, the 9th book in the Discworld series. It's no secret that while Terry Pratchett is my favorite author and Discworld is my favorite series, the Unseen University collection doesn't really hit as much for me as some of the other collections in Discworld. But is Eric better or worse than some of the others that we have read so far? Because most of the books, I believe at this point, have been from the Unseen University collection in this chronological read-along. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing Eric, discussing my opinions, and discussing your opinions, and you will also receive a full star rating from me as far as Eric is concerned. And I think the result might be surprising to you. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. This is now the 4th novel in the Unseen University collection for Discworld. And that means that we've had a lot of time to get used to Rincewind as a character, the bumbling, failed mage who somehow stumbles into saving the world pretty consistently. He's a fun character, and while the Unseen University collection is far from being my favorite, I do like Rincewind as a character. He's well written and entertaining, mostly. Which is good because the main character of this novel is not as entertaining as Rincewind, and in some cases is what I would say is the opposite of entertaining, which is not entertaining. In the previous Unseen University collection novel, Rincewind was taken from the Discworld and put in another dimension, but it was implied that he was going to come back eventually. And this book is Rincewind's return to the Discworld. And then some other stuff happens after that too. Even though I have read the Discworld series multiple times, this is my first chronological read-along, and after Sorcery, I could not remember how Rincewind came back. I knew that obviously he does come back and he is in additional novels, but I couldn't remember how that came about. And so when I got to Eric and it being part of the Unseen University collection, my first thought was that this was a novel about going to get Rincewind, but that's not the case. Rincewind comes back pretty much in the beginning of the story, thanks to the Microsoft Disk operating system. Eric is a parody. This is made abundantly clear on the covers of the original novels. In the original, it was written out as Faust, and then that was crossed out to read as Eric. It's a very intentional and very direct parody, more so than I think any of the other Discworld novels, not only thus far, but even afterward are. Eric isn't just a parody of Faust, it's a parody of multiple other things, but it's just a string of parodies, one after another. For example, we have our heroes put into the, I hesitate to call them heroes. We have our main characters put into the Discworld equivalent of the Trojan War, and they also go through Dante's Inferno, among numerous other parodies. Some of them are very direct and lengthy and just take up huge chunks of the book. Other parodies are not quite as egregious throughout the book, but for the most part, this book is just one long series of parodies of other stories. Despite my overall love for mythology, in fact, I really loved Greek and Egyptian mythology when I was growing up, to the point that this copy of the Iliad that I've had since I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. I got it when my grandma offered to buy me a book at Barnes & Noble while we were out during one of her visits to Texas, where I used to live, and I picked the Iliad. So yeah, I like Greek mythology and always have from a very young age. When I tell you that I feel that the parody of Greek mythology and other myths and stories and stuff actually detracted from the overall novel here, that's coming from somebody who loves the stories that it's parodying and was disappointed at how poorly that was done. I'm going to talk more about that later on when we get to the full opinion section. Before I get too deep into my opinion, I'm going to just go through the actual story of Eric. Obviously, spoilers will abound here for the rest of the video. Let's do a bit of a prelude first by talking about the end of Sorcery, the last time that we saw Rincewind. At the end of this novel, Rincewind was taken to the dungeon dimensions, or I guess threw himself into the dungeon dimensions as a sacrifice, and the luggage came after him. Rincewind was able to get Coin, the sorcerer, out of the dungeon dimensions, but he remained there himself, and that was the last that we saw of him. However, there was a hint in that novel on, I believe, the very last page that indicated Rincewind was going to come back. This was not the end of Rincewind's story. On that last page of the book, the librarian places the remains of Rincewind's hat on a pedestal, and the following text is written. No matter how far a wizard goes, he will always come back for his hat. And in Eric, Rincewind finally comes back for his hat. he also comes back and does some other things. Let's talk about the two main characters before we really get into the weeds of the story of Eric. First, we obviously have Rincewind. There's also Luggage, who needs no introduction. Everybody knows Luggage. But Rincewind is the bumbling wizard who has stumbled into success multiple times over. He's not all that heroic, and yet he does heroic things multiple times. He's pretty cowardly and runs away from danger, yet he somehow saves the world. This is our first time with Rincewind in, I think, 5 books, 5 or 4. This is definitely the longest gap that we have had between stories that featured Rincewind as a main character. Rincewind is constantly making a fool of himself. He's not very apt with magic. And yet, despite how, I hesitate to say unlikable because I do like him, but as a person, I would not want to hang out with Rincewind. But despite how unlikable he is in that respect, he is nothing compared to Eric. I have never met a good-natured Eric, let alone one who can take a joke. Feel free to prove me wrong in the comments. Unfortunately, the titular Eric for this novel is no exception to that, thus far, rule. He's entitled, he's whiny, he's self-aggrandizing, he's gross, and he's a pest. I feel like the novel would have been better off if Eric had just kind of been left behind after the first 30 or 40 pages. Once he summoned Rincewind, we could have moved on and just left him there. I did not enjoy reading Eric on the page, and I did not enjoy him as a co-protagonist. Especially having 2 unlikable co-protagonists. It kind of worked with Two Flower and Rincewind, although you'll probably recall that thus far has been one of my lowest rated Discworld novels. At least Two Flower has redeeming qualities. Eric, in my opinion, even by the end of the story, didn't. But we'll talk a little bit more about my problems with Eric's character after we have gone through the actual story and discussed that. When recalling this novel, it's tough to remember that this doesn't actually just kick off with Rincewind being summoned by Eric. There's actually a huge section in advance of that follows Death and the Wizards of Unseen University. We get what I think is probably one of the better opening lines in a Discworld novel. In it, we are introduced to Death on the page, and it reads, "The bees of death are big and black. They buzz low and somber. They keep their honey in combs of wax as white as altar candles. The honey is black as night, thick as sin, and sweet as treacle." This opening paragraph paints such a vivid picture, and it's so well written. Now, maybe this line is parodying something, but I don't think that it is. I'm pretty sure that this is just an original Terry Pratchett line that's just really good and a strong opener that really pulls you into the scene with Death. It's unfortunate the rest of the novel doesn't hold up to that, but it is a fantastic It's also a hilarious contrast to a line we get later on the page, which is, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die." Very different sentiment there. This is the first thought that we get from Rincewind in this book, and the first thought or words that we get from Rincewind in a long time. So I think this is a really good way to establish Rincewind as a character, or re-establish him if you are a returning reader, because this is the kind of character that Rincewind is. Even after having saved the world in sorcery, he is still a coward. He's had some character development over the course of the series, but I wouldn't say that huge character development is really a staple of Rincewind's character. Death later confirms that Rincewind is causing the problems for Unseen University. It's his existence in the dungeon dimensions that is causing these, or potentially him being called back from the dungeon dimensions that is causing the disturbances they're experiencing. I also love how the scene between Death and the Wizards of Unseen University ends. I love how all of the scenes between Wizards of Unseen University and Death happen, but this in particular was a really good ending line. One wizard tells Death goodbye, and Death simply replies, "Be seeing you." Finally, Rincewind is summoned via a magic circle powered by the Microsoft Disk operating system. That joke is going to make sense in a few minutes, I promise. The person who summoned him, Eric, will get his actual full name shortly, but Eric is convinced that he has successfully summoned a demon in Rincewind, this old, scraggly, beardy wizard.
Weirdy, beardy, magician-y man.
He's confident that he has succeeded, and so he gives his wishes to Rincewind. He wants a chest full of gold, he wants the most beautiful woman in all the land, and he wants to be a ruler. Let me double check that I got all of that. Okay, he wants to rule the world, meet the most beautiful woman ever, and be immortal. Oh, and then as an afterthought, he would like a chest full of gold. So all things that Rincewind is capable of doing, because as we know, he's a fantastic wizard. Eric Thursley is told by Rincewind that he is not a demon and he is not capable of delivering things like this in any capacity, let alone to fulfill a wish of some kind. Like, he cannot do these things, which of course makes Eric crestfallen, and he goes downstairs when his mom calls him for tea. Because yes, Eric is a 14-year-old boy, and boy, is he written like the worst 14-year-old boy that any of us have ever known. While Eric is downstairs getting that cup of tea, Rincewind goes and checks out the book that was used to summon him, and it is called, and I'm not going to be able to remember this all the top of my head, so I'm going to read it, Malefacrum Sumpta Diabolicite Ocularis Singularum, or the Book of Ultimate Control. The initials for that are MS DOS, Microsoft Disk Operating System. That's part of the joke here. The other part of the joke is actually the literal translation is a heavy allusion to HAL 9000. Also, I pronounced that correctly on my first try. I didn't remember it because that was never going to happen, but I did pronounce it correctly on my first try, which is impressive because I can barely pronounce the words that I do know. Now, a scene that's taking place elsewhere causes us to learn that Rincewind wasn't supposed to be summoned. Duke Vasanego was the one who was supposed to be summoned by Eric. That was the intent of the demons, and instead, Rincewind was summoned. I'm sure that we will get a reasonable explanation as to why and how that happened later on in the story. Demon King Astfagel is quite upset that his plan to have Eric summon Duke Vasanego failed. And we will definitely be seeing the Demon King a couple more times throughout this story. He is going to be the main antagonist. Besides Eric, I find Eric to be pretty antagonistic, but he's going to be the main antagonist of Eric, the story, not the character. I guess he's an antagonist of Eric, the character, as well. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Rincewind discovers that he does have some powers he is unaware of. He snaps his fingers and teleports them through time and space to another kingdom, the Tezuman Kingdoms. Eric is excited about the Lost Kingdoms because he thinks he's going to get a lot of money and that there's going to be a hot Amazonian princess here. Ew. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more of that kind of sentiment from him as we progress. The Tezuman Kingdoms are a riff on the Aztecs. I don't think that it's a riff on any actual specific stories. I think it's more just a riff on their mythology and history overall. But the god Quetzalcoatl is parodied in this as Quetzalcoatl. Rincewind, in his effort to grant Eric's wishes, tries to get a tribute paid to him. You know, money, I assume. I assume part of this deal would not be a princess or a woman of any kind being given to Eric. Of course, as part of this, it turns out they're going to be sacrificed to Quetzalcoatl. Escaping this fate is easier than expected, however, because once Quetzalcoatl, a demon it turns out, is summoned, we get this scene. Now then, Quetzalcoatl began. Sorry, I think I said Quetzalcoatl when in the Discworld it's Quetzalcoatl. Now then, Quetzalcoatl began. This is very important. Unfortunately, no one ever found out why. At that moment, the luggage breasted the top of the pyramid, its legs whirring like propellers, and landed squarely on the slabs. There was a brief, flat squeak. With Quetzalcoatl squished, Rincewind and Eric make their escape from the Tezuman Kingdoms, and instead they end up elsewhere once Rincewind snaps his fingers again. They wind up in the Discworld equivalent of the Trojan War, actually apparating initially inside of the wooden horse that is being pushed into the gates. Or has already been pushed into the gates. I will say that once they arrive in the city, Eric does have a pretty funny quip here, where he says, "Fat chance of finding the most beautiful woman in the world in a dump like this." Famously, the most beautiful woman in the world launched 1,000 ships and is the whole reason this war is happening. But anyway, their attempt to flee accidentally causes them to let the Ephebians into the city, and they eventually make contact with Eleanor of Sor. Eric is not impressed by Eleanor. He finds her to be less beautiful than he had hoped because she has matured and she's an older woman. And he's 14 years old, I'm going to reiterate. And they also make contact with the Odysseus character, Lavelos. And they make contact with the Odysseus character, Lavelos, whose name means Rincer of Winds, indicating that he may well be related to Rincewind. Once Lavelos knows that Rincewind and Eric are from the future and they know what happens to him, he does ask them what befalls him on his way home, and Rincewind says, "You get home okay. You're well known for it, in fact. There's whole legends about you going home." And then Rincewind snaps his fingers later and takes them to hell. Okay, actually, let's rewind because there are some other things that happen before they get to hell. First, they end up at what I believe is the beginning of time and space, with the creator making things. So they go all the way back. Rincewind and the creator's scene does have an amusing moment or two, but ultimately it's one of those scenes that I feel could have been cut. I actually feel like a lot of this book could have been cut down. Even though it has an amusing bit or two, it just feels really unnecessary and adds to additional bloat in the story that was already kind of bloated, despite, again, being really small. Like, this is a very short book. The creator scene, as amusing as it was, doesn't really add a whole lot to the story, in my opinion, other than one possible thing that I theorized toward the end of this video. After Rincewind and Eric meet and engage with the creator, they go to hell, and they encounter Urglflaga. Urglflaga has a really good introduction here that I'll read for you. "Where are we?" said Rincewind. Various mouths beamed. "Quail mortals." "What? We're in a bird?" "Grovel and cower mortals," the demon corrected itself. Urglflaga serves as a guide through hell, wherein it is revealed that this entire story has been Duke Vasanego's plot, the demon who was supposed to be summoned instead of Rincewind. His plan was, and I'm gonna have a hard time remembering it, but his plan was for Rincewind to distract the Demon King Astfogel enough that he could complete a takeover of hell while the Demon King was distracted, because the Demon King Astfogel has been changing things around here in ways that people don't really like. He's been making it boring, and no one's having a good time. The demons specifically aren't really enjoying the work anymore, and the humans are really bored instead of being tormented. So yeah, Duke Vasanego is trying to restore the original order here, and I guess this was the best way to do it. Once Duke Vasanego takes control of hell, he sends Rincewind and Eric back to spread word about hell, and the story ends. That's it. So that was the big twist. Oh, sorry. He gave Rincewind his powers. That's why Rincewind snapping his fingers would take them places. He gave them like a taste of his power. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about my opinion on this book. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Eric is my least favorite Discworld novel that we have read thus far. I genuinely think it is actually not a good novel. One thing I want to note before I give you my star rating is, and I think this has been a misconception for a while, I think that people, not everybody, but I think that some people assume that when I give a star rating to one of these books in the read along, I'm tier ranking that book in the Discworld series. That is not the case. When I give a book 5 stars, that means it is up there with some of my favorite novels ever, like Dark Age or Rage of Dragons. If I give a Discworld novel 1 star, that means that it is down there with the Da Vinci Code. I might do a tier ranking of the Discworld novels later on or something. Maybe I'll think about doing that. But right now I'm actually giving it a full star rating compared to all literature, not just the rest of Discworld. So Terry Pratchett is my favorite author and Discworld is my favorite series, but not every single book is going to be as much of a winner as the others. Terry Pratchett is an incredible writer. He is prolific, but this book just fell short in a lot of ways, unfortunately. It has great references, it has excellent prose, it has some fun characters, and it's a nod to mythologies that I actually enjoy. Faust and Greek mythology and Dante's Inferno and all sorts of things. Like, it has a lot of fun nods and it's a fun parody, but I was left thinking that it would have been a lot better if it was even shorter, because it really overstayed its welcome with the parody. I'm reminded of movies like Vampires Suck.
You don't get it. I'm a killer.
Or The Hungry Games.
I volunteer for the Starving Games.
Avengers, assemble.
Wait, don't slip out those.
Both of those are ones that I was like, hey, this trailer is actually pretty funny. And then you watch the movie and you go, wow, they really, really milked that and dragged it on for as long as they possibly could. And it made it so much worse than it would have otherwise been. And I think, unfortunately, that's the case for Eric as well. It is a parody, and it is a thorough, lengthy parody, and it just really goes for it. in a lot of ways. I am grateful for the fact that it doesn't just parody one thing, it's a parody of multiple things all rolled into one. Like, I think Terry Pratchett did this kind of thing in the best way possible, which isn't surprising because Terry Pratchett and he's good at what he does. But even doing something like that in the best way possible just isn't going to let it land as well for me as a wholly original story would have. Just like those movies, I'm left thinking that was fine, but it would have been better bite-sized. Or now it is clear that the main point of Eric is to get Rincewind back into this setting. I think that's part of why this book is so short, is because the goal was get Rincewind back, and then he kind of developed a story around how Rincewind came back from the dungeon dimensions. And that's fine. I do have my issues with that though. One of them is we could have left Eric behind and continued on after Rincewind got summoned or something like that. Maybe he has consequences for being summoned the way that he did. I think that there were other stories that could have been told with that setup. This book has a really good setup, and then it just falls short after that. You also have to follow the terrible co-protagonist of Eric. He is insufferable in this book. I cannot stand Eric. He made Rincewind look so much better, and I like Rincewind, but holy crap, he looked like the most likable and lovable protagonist in any story I'd ever read compared to his co-protagonist of Eric. And that also means you have two unlikable characters. Again, Rincewind, I do like Rincewind. He is a well-written, unlikable character. He's the unlikely hero, he's a coward, he's a bumbling buffoon, he's incapable and incompetent, and yet he's fun to read on the page. He has some great lines, and he does have a lot of redeeming qualities. Maybe not a lot of, he has some redeeming qualities. Eric didn't. Unless you consider being a 14-year-old boy a redeeming quality, which as someone who used to be one of those, I don't think that it is. Another thing that contributed to me not liking this book as much as I could have is it's a buddy comedy, which is one of my least favorite genres, just in general. I don't really enjoy buddy comedies. The very first Discworld novel, Color of Magic, which I also rated pretty low, is a buddy comedy with Two Flower and Rincewind, but Two Flower is way more redeemable and more enjoyable to read than Eric has ever been. This book is a divine buddy comedy. Not in that this book is divine or that the buddy comedy aspect of it is divine. It's, you know, like a divine comedy. Anyway, I don't like buddy comedies as a genre, just in general. I don't like them as movies or shows. Now again, a lot of this has come down to personal taste for me. If you're somebody who thinks that movies like Vampires Suck or The Hunger Games are a 10 out of 10 comedy and you love a good buddy comedy, you are probably going to give this book 5 stars. I think that that's the person this book is for, is somebody who likes those things a lot. Those are just two things I don't enjoy a whole lot. And unfortunately, that's what this book was. So it just wasn't for me. More on Eric. Eric is a horrible character I wanted to hate. And not in a, ooh, this is a well-written, unlikable character kind of way. In a, this guy sucks. He's bad. At one point, he says,
I want to be a eunuch, sir, because you get to work at a harem all day long.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I don't like this kid. I would give this novel an additional star in my star rating if Eric had been left behind when Rincewind went to the First Kingdom. Why did he go along in general? It feels like it would have been so easy to write him out and just have this be Rincewind's adventure. This would have been better if it was just Rincewind's adventure, honestly. I think I would have preferred that. I wish I had more to say about this novel. Usually I can pull something out of a Terry Pratchett novel to chew on and really think about and extract some sort of lesson from, or some insight that I didn't have the last time. Ultimately, I just don't have a lot to say about Eric as a novel. I wish that I did. That is part of why it took me so long to put this video together, is I just couldn't think of anything to add to the conversation on this book. Yeah, I could comment on Terry Pratchett having bureaucracy in the workplace be a version of hell, which I think is fun, but I think it's also a little overdone now. Maybe it wasn't back when this was written, but now what am I gonna add to that? Go watch Office Space. Eric is tough to rate. On one hand, it's a really easy book to read. It's fast, it's quick, and it doesn't overstay its welcome as much as it could have. But even with that being said, I still just didn't like it all that much. And reflecting on it, I don't feel like I enjoyed my time with it as much as I should have. That being said, with a heavy heart, I'm going to be giving Eric by Terry Pratchett 1.5 stars. I did not enjoy it. I don't have a lot to add to the conversation about it. and it just had a lot of things that I don't like as a reader myself. So not only did I think that it wasn't executed super well, but it also has so many elements that are just not the kind of story I would ordinarily pick up. So 1.5 stars from me for Eric by Terry Pratchett. Anyway, even our gods can't pump out a banger every single time. Let's go ahead and get to your opinion on Eric by Terry Pratchett. If you are somebody who wants your own opinion to be appearing in these videos and wants me to talk about the things that you think, definitely go and check out the post for the next book, which is Moving Pictures by Terry Pratchett. That is book 10 in the Discworld series. So go check out that post, give a star rating for Moving Pictures, and leave a comment, and I will discuss that in the next video. I do everything I can to discuss every comment that I receive, even the ones that I think are really short and I don't have a lot to say about. I'll at least ask you what you meant. The average star rating that everybody gave this is 3.5, which is quite a bit higher than my star rating for Eric. We had a couple of 5 stars in there that skewed it, and on top of that, YouTube polls only allow you to do 4 options instead of 5. They used to let me do 5, but now you can only do 4, so I don't have 1-star options. So I think that could be part of what's skewing it upward. But there are some people who gave it 5 stars. No one told me why. So if you are someone who thinks this book deserves 5 stars, I'd love to hear what you like about it, what it means to you, etc. Let me know in a comment and I will be happy to read it and respond to that. I want to know why people love this book. Not because I think it's weird that you do, but I am just curious as to what your tastes are and what it is about this book that appeals to you so much. Let's go ahead and talk about the comments. We're going to get to Typing Ape's comment first. Typing Ape says, "My favorite part is that summoning a demon characterizes modern dating all too well." Thanks for your comment, the Typing Ape. Could you please elaborate for me? I didn't have this experience. Wollervine says, "It's a low 3, one of the least of all the books, yet there's still a lot to amuse in there. Satire of the Workplace is the most successful." Thinking back on it after reading this comment, yeah, I did enjoy the bureaucratic satire overall more than most other elements of this book. Those did really work for me. God. Those worked for me more than most other elements of the book. I liked those. I liked the workplace satire, the bureaucracy, mocking, all of that. That is something that I'm all too familiar with, so I did enjoy those aspects of the book as well. That was well done. And there are lots of smaller, well-done pockets in this book. It's just that as a whole, it falls short for me. But yeah, I agree with you overall that this is one of the least of all of the Discworld books, for sure. I don't think that anything else is going to come close to being as lowly rated by me as this one. Amy Myers says, "Reaction after my first reading of Eric, 2 stars. Not even shiny gold stars, more like the bedraggled, worn out sequin stars on Rincewind's hat." I like that imagery a lot. Pratchett did the angsty, powerful wizard kid before in Sorcery, which I would also rank 2 stars. The plot is a magical mystery tour of tropes in literature and history. It's clever, it's parody, it's an absurdist examination of hell without any real risk to our heroes. The motivation of the demons for tempting and recruiting Eric was unconvincing. Rincewind and the luggage escaped the dungeon dimensions, which may be the only reason for this book to exist because there is no plot. I'm glad that we came to so many of the same conclusions. Now, I hadn't actually thought about the fact that, yeah, he did the angsty wizard kid with Sorcery. I think I liked Coin as a character considerably more than I liked Eric as a character. So yeah, he did this in the previous Unseen University book, which I hadn't thought about, so that's a good point. You also noted, just as I did, that this book seems to just be to get Rincewind back into the disc, and it wasn't done in a super great way. As you noted, there isn't really a plot here. The plot is just kind of that really hurt this book a lot. Like I said, I think this book could have stopped with Rincewind being summoned, and Terry Pratchett could have emailed it to all of his fans and been done with it. Amy continues, "Hell in Discworld and Hell in Good Omens have many similarities. What's the deal? Eric and Good Omens were both published in 1990. Maybe Eric was a sketchbook for the leftover ideas from Good Omens. We know Death was borrowed from Discworld to appear in Good Omens, and I'm okay with that. Maybe we should look at Eric as a sketchbook. It felt incomplete. It reminded me a bit of The Salmon of Doubt by Douglas Adams, published posthumously from Fragments and Notes. It wasn't a worthy sequel in the Dirk Gently series. Out of 41 books in the Discworld series, not every one will be a masterpiece. In comparison, the vast majority of us have never been published, so one stinker of a book by a prolific author is one more than will ever get published." And I'm looking at Stephen King too. I really love Terry Pratchett and I love his writing. And even in this, I like his writing in this. I just didn't enjoy the story as much. And I felt like it fell short in a number of ways. But that doesn't mean that Terry Pratchett's a bad author all of a sudden. This is one bad book and I'm going to love the others. Maybe I'll love the next one even more than I otherwise would have now that I've read Eric beforehand. At the end of this comment, Amy adds, anyway, there's too much going on in life to put too much brainpower into analyzing this one. And to be honest, I had to consult the annotated Pratchett file, a website, and the Pratchett read-along blog on Reactor, formerly Tor. It's been a lifetime ago since I read excerpts of Greek classics and about 25 years since reading Milton in seminar in grade school. I'm familiar with the basic structure of Dante's Inferno as it influenced Milton. I've never read the versions of Faust by Marlowe or Goethe, but know the basics. I have no clever literary analysis for you, TL. I'm sorry. You're talented and will skillfully break down the book and create an informative and entertaining video for us. I appreciate that vote of confidence. I have read Faust, and as I noted early in this video, I've read a lot of Greek mythology. It was one of my favorite things to read about and learn about when I was younger. But I still felt like this fell short, and I don't have a whole lot to add because it was just parody. It wasn't really commentating on the modern world as much as most of Pratchett's books do. It's still entertaining, and he still did a good job parodying those works, but it's just not what I've come to expect from Terry Pratchett or his stories. Amy gave one more comment a couple of months ago before I started working on this video. After having a long think, there is one trope Pratchett uses effectively: wishes. Eric was not careful or specific enough in his wishes. The demons obviously are devious and sadistic and will grant wishes based on their knowledge and interpretations. They don't perceive linear time the way humans do, so when Eric requests the most beautiful woman in the world, naturally the demons choose the most legendarily beautiful woman in history. Eric meets her not when she is in her prime, but when she has matured and isn't beautiful anymore, at least by a boy's standard of beauty. Likewise for Eric's other wishes, the moral of the story: don't summon demons, don't ask non-specific wishes. Wish-granting entities will always fulfill wishes in the most literal, sadistic, and funny ways at the expense of the wisher. I genuinely had stopped thinking about the wish aspect of this book pretty early on. Maybe that's because I just kind of perceived Eric as being super demanding and whiny, and so I wasn't really thinking about the wish and monkey's paw element of it. But you're right, he actually did get his wishes fulfilled, at least he got most of them fulfilled in a twisted and sadistic way. He got his chest full of gold in exchange for being sacrificed, although he avoided being sacrificed. He did get to meet the most beautiful woman in the world. It's just he didn't meet her at a time when he, as an immature 14-year-old boy, would think that she was pretty. And then he also wished for immortality, which I don't think that he got. I think the closest thing to that would be going back to meet the creator and go back to the beginning of time. That might be the closest thing to immortality, but I'm not entirely sure how you could twist that wish and make that immortality necessarily. It's, yeah, maybe that just means that he's lived forever technically, like up to this point. Maybe that's what that means. I'm not sure, but that's my guess as to how the immortality wish was fulfilled. Yeah, he did get his wishes fulfilled in a twisted monkey's paw sort of way. So always, when you are faced with the option to get a wish from some sort of entity, consult a lawyer first. Thank you so much for your comments, Amy. It is always a joy to read them. Even when you feel like you don't have a lot to add, I also didn't feel like I had a lot to add to the story of Eric. I did my best, but this was one that was difficult to write because I just didn't have a lot to say about this one. And now it's on to the next. Eric was our 9th Discworld novel, our last single-digit Discworld novel in this chronological read-along of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And our next book to read is Moving Pictures. I think I mentioned that it was the Industrial Revolution. It's not. It's Unseen University. If you don't have it already, I will have affiliate links in the description. I'll get a small kickback if you do pick those up that way, and I would appreciate if you do. But ideally, you go support your library or something like that unless you are really keen on owning these books as we go through them. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I really appreciate it. It is a lot of work to put these together, and on top of that, the state of the world right now doesn't really make me feel like I want to do stuff like that. But at the same time, I think that absurdism is a great lens with which to look at even the darkest of times. So I do want to keep doing this. In the description, there will be a link to where you can go and leave a comment and a star rating for Moving Pictures. So go check that out. Leave your thoughts and your opinions so that I can add them into the next video when I get a chance to make that. And again, thank you already for participating and supporting me as much as you have. I appreciate it immensely. Have a good day.